Thank you. Let me follow up on Mr. Brubaker, follow up on the gentlewoman's comments. You talked about the difficulty small fantasy sports companies may have trying to comply with so many different state laws. Um, so do you support federal involvement? And is there a way to do something at the federal level that doesn't force states who don't want daily fantasy sports or gaming to allow it?
We'll work with just about anybody that wants to help us figure this out. If that's the federal government, we'll do that. If it's going state to state, that's a much harder path for us to go down. Certainly, if you look at, let me take a step backwards. So we looked at UGA as companies, these small companies did, and they saw that in 2006 as a green light by the federal government to go online with fantasy sports. Now, that was all season long at that time. That was before daily even was contemplated. So we have companies that are relying on you guys and said, go ahead and go start your businesses, and they've gone out and they've started their businesses, and now we have states coming in and changing the game, changing the format. I don't think you'll hear any daily fantasy sports company or season-long fantasy sports company balk at consumer protections, as long as they're done in a way that is financially viable to stay in business.
All right.
They
Well,
get too expensive.
Maybe that's something that we can look into. Thank you. Let me go back to Mr. Schenke again. And again, I'm asking you specifics about DraftKings and FanDuel, which you said you can answer. I want to talk about the so-called insider trading scandal that was reported on last fall. Ethan Haskell, a DraftKings employee, was accused of using information he obtained in the course of his work to help his play on FanDuel's platform, and an independent investigation cleared him of any wrongdoing, noting that he didn't receive the information until his lineup was locked. But the report prepared by the law firm that conducted the independent investigation was not publicly released. Do you know why DraftKings did not release that report?
I don't have that information. I know they've been pretty forthcoming with a lot of the details of what happened.
Yeah, the mic.
I apologize. I said
Well,
I don't have the detail. I don't have the details of that.
All right, but I mean, again, we're relying on you to answer these questions of the two, of DraftKings and FanDuel's. Where did the information received by Mr. Haskell come from? Do you know who sent it to him, or was that person playing daily fantasy sports? Did that person gain an advantage from the information?
The information that he had was the number of players, the percentage ownership, which may give you an advantage if you know that one player that has a lot of ownership and one player doesn't. And so it was the internal mechanism to calculate that. And he compiles a report. He compiled the report after the game's locked, when it was no big deal, and there was an inadvertent release of that.
Well, Mr. Schenke, since you say you can answer these questions, maybe you can't today, but with the chairman's permission, I would like to, you to follow up and get back to me and try to answer them on behalf of DraftKings, if you would. All right, then. Now, DraftKings prohibits its own employees and employees of other daily fantasy sports operators from playing on its site, and FanDuel prohibits its employees from playing on its own site or other daily fantasy sports sites. How does DraftKings ensure that employees of other daily fantasy sports operators are not playing? Do competitors share their employee lists with DraftKings, to your knowledge?
It's also a component of the laws that we are advocating for across the country and that have been passed. One of the key components is that daily fantasy sports companies, and actually all paid fantasy sports companies, cannot play on other people's platforms. So there's obviously a big legal incentive to get it right as well.
And how does FanDuel ensure that its employees are not playing on another DFS site? Do competitors share those lists of users with FanDuel's?
As far as what the specific companies are doing, I don't have that.
Well, again, I would ask you to find out, because Professor Eggert points out that employees have access to spreadsheets that show the players who are the biggest losers on the DFS sites. And, I'm just wondering, how does FanDuel ensure that those lists are not being used to invite those losers to head-to-head matches? And the same thing with DraftKings. I mean, you, I guess, can't answer these things right now, but...
No, but we as an industry are advocating for laws at the state level to prevent this from happening, and I think that'll be a big disincentive for any company to allow that to happen.
Well, I'm going to ask you to get back to me on these questions because, again, you know, the two companies didn't come, and they say that you can answer the questions. So please get back to us, and, you know, I'll send it in writing as well, so you know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.